Every relationship has rules or guidelines that say what's okay and what's not okay in the relationship and so forth. Just like if you're into sports, a sports game of soccer or whatever game will have some rules, because otherwise in the case of soccer there will be 22 people running around on the field not sure what's okay and if the ball goes out of play and so forth, what does that mean? And in our relationships, these rules are guidelines are sometimes clear and sometimes unclear. Sometimes they are spoken and sometimes they're unspoken. This leads us to 4 different categories of rules or guidelines in relationships. The first category is when the guidelines for what is okay, how it's okay to behave and not in the relationship, when they are clear and spoken. So when the guidelines are clear and spoken, that tends to create safe relationships. People know what is expected, they know what it's okay to do and not to do. So the rules of the game, so to speak, are clear and they're spoken. Everybody knows what they are. They might not necessarily think they are the greatest guidelines, but they accept them and they are clear and spoken. The second category of guidelines is when the guidelines are unclear and spoken. This is that they have been communicated maybe in writing or some other way, they have been spoken, but they are very unclear. And this tends to create uncertain relationships because we don't really know. It has this fancy saying of this is how we want things. For example, in a company, the directors or board of directors or management of the company might have come up with a few guidelines for how we're supposed to behave or act within the company, but they have not really been communicated, just informed to the employees of the company, and they maybe don't understand. It says like respect other people, but respect can mean so many different things to people. So it's spoken but at the same time very unclear, and that tends to create uncertain relationships. Then we have the third category of guidelines. That is when the guidelines are clear but unspoken. In a work setting, this would be if you go to a cafeteria or lunchroom and there are no names on the chairs, but people who work and visit the restaurant, if this is within a company, everybody knows that that's Bob's seat, that's Jim's seat. And if you come in as a new employee in this company, it can be really hard because you sit down on a chair that is Bob's chair and people will start looking at you really funny because everyone knows it's sort of in the walls. It's that is Bob's chair, and there might even be a fight because you're sitting in Bob's chair. It doesn't say anywhere, but it's unspoken and it's very clear to everyone. And these kinds of guidelines, they create manageable relationships. Maybe not the happiest and best relationships, but they are manageable. You can manage as long as you learn these guidelines, and you do pretty fast. If you're new in a group or in a relationship, you tend to learn them fast because by experience you will notice what they are. And the fourth category of guidelines or rules is of course then when they are unclear and unspoken. And this is just, there has been no talk of guidelines or how to behave, and it's all unclear, and it tends to be a setting of a lot of manipulation. So we get manipulative relationships where people try to manipulate each other in different ways, and that tends to take a lot of energy away. So what's the point of this for your relationship? Well, it is to just know that there are, for your relationship with your partner, you also have a set of rules or guidelines, whether they're conscious or unconscious, clear or spoken or unspoken and so forth. They are there. And for you to talk about with your partner about what are your expectations towards each other. How do you expect each other to behave? What expectations do you have when it comes to your relationship? And then find the common ground that accommodates your different needs. And talk about it so it is spoken, and make sure to ask questions about how do you understand this, how do I, and communicate with each other so it's not just spoken but also clear. That way you will get that safe relationship, the common ground that you can just then start building your passion and flow of love and happiness and everything else on.